So in this conversation, we're aiming to talk about how entrepreneurs can build sustainability into their work from the start, what it really takes underneath and behind the scenes to come up with and scale sustainable technologies, and overall how to make an impact in a space that's as urgent and as vast as climate and sustainability. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Building Thinkers podcast, the podcast where we explore accessible blueprints for learning, entrepreneurship, leadership, and life. And today we're going to be talking about building better systems and products, ones that prioritize both sustainability and scale. And my guest has spent his incredible career doing just that. He co-founded a company that creates carbon negative building materials, and now he leads Supercool, a media platform that spotlights climate technologies making a real world difference, and a bunch of other stuff that we'll get into during this episode. So today I'm so excited to be joined by
Josh Dorfman.
Josh, I would love for you to share a little bit more about how you got to the work that you're doing. And since it's the Building Thinkers podcast, if you want to help land the story in, what is it that you would say you build now, and however you want to get there?
So what I build and have been working on for the last 20 years are businesses that have a focus on sustainability, climate impact, really trying to use the power of business, media to affect change. I went to China in my early 20s after college. I ended up being in a city called Nanjing, teaching English on this university, Nanjing University of Science and Technology. And an American company called Kryptonite that made bicycle locks opened their first factory in China, like 20 minutes from where I was teaching on this university. And they needed an American to show up periodically in that factory to let the Chinese side know, America's far away, but we've got eyes on the ground. And so I ended up going to work for Kryptonite full time. And through that experience, I became very attuned to the fact that there were 1 billion people at the time in China riding bicycles. And 2 years into that experience, we opened a factory in southern China. I was traveling with a Chinese businessman who we were partnering with. We were in his Mercedes. We get to this parking lot. This is in Guangzhou. Every car in the parking lot's a Mercedes. And before we go into the restaurant, he stops me and says, "Josh, look, my Mercedes is the biggest Mercedes of all the Mercedes in this parking lot." And in that moment, I thought, right, you're just like us. You want more, you want bigger, you want raise your standard of living, raise quality of life. And there's 1 billion people here, and there's highways, bridges, tunnels, all this infrastructure coming in so fast. None of these people riding bikes actually want bikes. They all want cars. I don't know anything about global warming, but I know enough to know that this is going to be a problem. And that then led me down a path. And that's how I got there.
I think one of the things that strikes me already from your story is this, I don't know, let's go figure it out. I don't know, let's go figure it out. And up to that point, can you reflect back on anything that gave you that impetus for that approach? Because others might say, I don't speak the language, I don't know, and they just back out of there. But you went forward and leaned into it. What do you attribute that to?
I started to have this conception of myself as a kid going through high school. I had a different kind of self-image for who I wanted to be, right? And who I wanted to be in high school. And I was adamant that I was going to play football. And over 4 years, I achieved what I wanted to achieve from it. I became captain of my football team. I was the quarterback. I made this thing happen from something that wasn't expected of me. For me, that experience, I think, really shaped the way that I saw how I could maybe be in the world and go accomplish things that maybe others didn't necessarily see in me or weren't the prescribed path. And I think I've carried that forward.
I see a trend in people that I talk to in entrepreneurship. I have a piece of this story as well, where it's almost like the pattern is broken, or another way to say it is like the kind of lie that we've been told even maybe is debunked, because you're like, oh, wait, that maybe what I thought was safe is actually not safe, because it could lead to a life that I'm not satisfied by when there's other possibilities here. Or maybe it's different definitions of safe even, but this recognition of, and maybe self-confidence to recognize I can do this again. It becomes a positive self-reinforcement to say, I figured it out that time. Now I can apply that same sense of, I like to call it the posture of experimentation, to try it over here. So I think another spot is when there is a big idea and you've got that desire for change. What else is there to it when you start to try to put the pieces together? Because we know that, the vision alone and desire is not quite enough to get to building a company that's, creating these carbon neutral building materials and Planted. And I read that Fast Company recognized it as one of the most innovative companies. And so how do you get there?
Everything starts with the same list. It doesn't, right? The end, the outcome, if you have vision, that's helpful. But I remember when I started my first company, it was called Vivavi, like Viva V, live life. But I remember when I was starting that company, so it was a modern design, sustainable furniture, home furnishings company. And I was very passionate about this idea early on of blending design with sustainability, so that if I were going to try to market something to a consumer, I could market design, and kind of this eco-friendly value proposition would just be embedded in something that was really beautiful anyway. But I remember when I was starting that company and I had my list, okay, here's my to-do list, the 10 things I do today. And the moment that was kind of very poignant for me was looking at that list and realizing there's no one else here to do the things on this list but me. Right? Either I am going to do these things and this project is going to move forward, even though I have anxiety and I'm nervous and I haven't done these things before. Not that they're earth-shattering things. I just need to call a certain company and say, I am a retailer. I'd like to carry your line, but I've never done that before. It's creating anxiety for me. But it was this feeling of like, it's either me or no one. It's either me or this isn't going to happen. I can't lean on anybody else. Yeah. And that is incredibly anxiety provoking. And it's just like, at least it was for me, exercising the muscle over and over and over again of just saying, okay, I am going to do my to-do list, and almost playing a trick on my mind of just saying like, look, I could be working for somebody else. I'd still have a to-do list, right? Like but it was just this feeling of the pressure of like, it's all on me. And the fact is that's true. Like you start a company, it's all on you. But the biggest things still start with that 10 things on a to-do list. And so, I know there's probably whole schools of thought on getting started on projects and break it down into smaller parts, but it's just the only way to start. And so that's, clarity of vision, hugely important. Do your to-do list.
Getting things done.
Go do it. Yeah. Check it off. Feel good checking it off.
It's encouraging to hear that as an entrepreneur myself, of like, there's no magic to the piece of, yes, there's lots of, psychology and neuroscience behind habits, and all of these things can be helpful. And if you spend so much time stuck in thinking about the things on your list and don't actually go do them, nothing moves forward. And I see a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs stuck in that space of thinking they have to wait for the perfect time. They have to wait for the perfect idea. They have to wait for the perfect team, the perfect amount of funding, and then miss windows or opportunities to get started with an MVP or something in that way. Can we go to even a definition of sustainability in your mind? And might you give some advice to our listeners about how they can be thinking about sustainability?
Well, my view of sustainability is, I think, pretty simple. My view about sustainability is, how do we live as well as we possibly can, build the best businesses we possibly can, and enable future generations to do the same thing on a finite planet, right? That's really it. And so I build companies because this is my life and this is my commitment, where the more the product that I'm selling or the service I'm providing is succeeding, the more money we're making, the more good we're doing in the world, right? So it was this, you mentioned briefly this company, Planted. We came up with this idea, this was 5 years ago, that and we is two guys that I had met from SpaceX, just incredible guys who are working on the life support systems for the Dragon crew spacecraft to keep astronauts alive. So they were thinking about this like tiny little bubble that astronauts are in, and how do you regulate carbon? How do you make sure you have, just the right amount of everything so that people can survive? And then we started thinking, okay, planet Earth, how do you regulate spaceship Earth? We have too much carbon up in the atmosphere. How do we pull that down? How do we get back to regulation? We came up with this idea. Could we find something that grows faster than trees? Trees absorb carbon from the atmosphere. Could we accelerate that by planting something else? We did. We found this grass, perennial grass, kind of like bamboo, that grows extremely fast. And then we said, if we could do that and we grow it, although no one's growing it in the world really at the level we want to do it, could we build a factory with no smokestack so we could take that grass, turn it into whatever trees are turned into for building materials, which the thing they're turned into the most are these panels that you nail to the 2x4s, right? Plywood or into strand board to build a house. And so could we do that so we pull carbon faster from the atmosphere, lock it away in the walls and roofs of new homes? So that business, it's very linear. It's very straightforward. If I'm in another business and I'm an entrepreneur and I'm thinking, okay, this sounds interesting. What could I do? I think what's very exciting is the toolkit that's available to companies and to entrepreneurs is just so much greater today than it's ever been. And when I left Planted, I stepped down as CEO last year and started this company, Supercool, which is the media company. And this is kind of what we do. We go out there and we say, what's out there? What's real? What's working? That's cutting carbon now, helping companies boost their bottom line and raise quality of life in the process. Maybe a better customer experience, or literally maybe like there's more trees planted somewhere in a city and like everybody benefits. But there's these components. No director of facilities or plant manager or, even CFO, no one wakes up in the morning and thinks, you know what I really need today? I really need some more AI in my building, right? Like no one thinks that way, but they would like to cut their costs, right? Have more control over predictive maintenance, tell their maintenance crews where to go and what they're going to be encountering, maybe what tools to bring, all these things that AI can do once you implement the solution. Those types of low carbon solutions, sustainability solutions that enhance business are so much more prevalent today. So entrepreneurs, they can listen to Supercool. We're doing this all the time, but like these solutions are starting to permeate more into industry. And one of the reasons why is because, it's been over a decade now, probably 15 years in this kind of clean tech 2.0. So many technology companies got funded, got through the lab, got through pilots into commercial scale, and now are scaling up market than ever before that have this mandate to help kind of mainstream businesses cut their carbon.
One of the sentence stems that we like to use is if only people knew. And I think this connects and builds on what you were talking about. When people are thinking about climate change, when people are thinking about sustainability, what is it if only people knew?
So it's related to this, but I think if only people knew that solving climate change did not mean sacrifice, and if only people knew that solving climate change could make their lives better. That's not to say that every climate change solution is good. Many of them aren't, but a lot of them do check these boxes. And we just don't have that awareness yet as a society, as a culture, within the business community, that we really are living in a new moment in this, what is becoming this age of adoption where, forward-looking entrepreneurs and companies are realizing this is different. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that frustrates me, I would say, around this conversation is the United Nations Communication Department put out a pretty comprehensive study with other really good partners, like some folks from Yale and other places who look at climate communications. Mm-hmm. And the report said, if you want to get people to lean in and pay attention, don't focus on the problem, focus on solutions. Well, if you listen to, pick your, whoever's leading the United Nations at any given time, you're going to hear that person and a lot of others talking about the problem and not taking their own advice. And yet the academic literature, professionals in the field will tell you, if you talk about problems, which is also what the media does, people just tune out. They don't they're like, yeah, I get it. Climate change is a problem. Like, they tune out. Right? You have to talk about solutions. And there are some incredible solutions. Say, that's what I wish people knew and understood more.
And perhaps that takes us to a bit about Supercool. Will you tell us about that? How did you get rolling there, and what's the premise, and what are you after?
So when I stepped down from Planted and picked my head up after being very focused on materials and the building industry and home building, and looked around and said, okay, what else is happening around climate, around these things that I'm excited about, around innovation? What else is out there like Planted? And I saw three things. I saw what I just described to you about suddenly all of these climate tech companies that have made far more progress than I realized. That was very exciting to me. I saw in 2024, it's happening again in 2025, $2 trillion globally was invested in clean energy technologies. It's going to happen again in 2025. That's nearly double what's being invested in fossil fuels. And for context, fossil fuels have never reached $2 trillion of investment in any given year. And so the curve of what's going up and what's going down, I mean, right? This future is happening. And then I looked at the fact that there are 15,000 cities around the world that have climate action plans in place that are turning their cities into living laboratories for climate action. And of course, that's in the obvious places like New York City, where they've put building codes in place that are going to dramatically curb the carbon intensity of buildings. But it also happens in places like Lincoln, Nebraska, that are doing really interesting things to incentivize owners of low income housing to renovate units in a way that works for the people living in those units, raises their quality of life, could be better insulation, works for the builder through these grants, and then raises the overall property values that lead to higher property taxes so that the city is actually getting paid back for these grants and everybody wins. And so I thought, we're in this new climate era. All of this positive change is underway, but it's underrepresented in the media. Yes. And my theory of change is going to be the more that we can kind of case study what's happening and wrap it in awesome storytelling and back it up with data and put that into the world targeting a business decision makers. And the more business decision makers can understand this exists, it is de-risked because other companies and cities and places are already using it successfully. I am not going to be fired if I take this to my boss. This is actually a baked good idea. The more that we can use that as a lever to drive positive change. That's what Supercool is. So it's a podcast, newsletter, YouTube, events. It's a media platform we're building. Like a 21st century media platform.
The theory of change is so powerful. And I have a new curiosity, which is twofold. One, how do you know when it's time to go when you've built something? So you built up, planted, launched, got it to this incredible place. How did you know? Some folks I find, serial entrepreneurs, are like, feel it. They're like, I'm ready for the next thing. I want to, how do you know? I
remember when I was in business school, I read this, was it a book? I had this great management professor. And so maybe she was teaching about this notion of entrepreneurship. What she said was, we have this mythology in America around entrepreneurship that everyone is Bill Gates and everyone is Zuckerberg and everyone is Steve Jobs and everyone who's an entrepreneur starts their company and takes it all the way to becoming a public company. And she's like, that's just not how it works. Those are the outliers. But we glorify the outliers so much that everybody thinks that's what entrepreneurship is, and it's not. There are people who are incredible at the beginning. There are people who are incredible at the rapid growth in terms of entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs, CEOs, whatever it may be, who can manage through that growth. And there are, of course, you might say they're less so entrepreneurs, just great CEOs who are great at managing a company that's now public, more stable. And when I heard that, I was like, oh, okay. She's like, that's great. She's like, there's so few people who are good at all that. Don't even worry about it. Just go focus on what you're great at. And so I know for myself, with my self-awareness and skill sets and drive and creativity, it's the earlier stages where I can take something that's nothing and I can give it form and get it funded and make it function. That's where my energy goes. That's where my passion and excitement lies. When it starts to become, businesses where the teams are getting bigger, there's more infrastructure, management infrastructure, HR, I start to lose some interest and I'm not really awesome at that. And I know that about myself, and I'm okay with that. So I know when it's time to go, or I start to feel it, because we're getting to a certain size where I'm no longer probably the right person, and someone else probably can step in and lead the next phase better than I can.
It's almost like you have permission then to be who you are, and go that direction. I think that's really helpful. What might you say to listeners who are at that spot of they've got an idea, they've maybe got it started and off the ground, and in that first, I recognize you said like once it gets to the HR and the larger management, that's not your favorite part. But I see a lot of people that are trying to figure out when's the right time to hire their first hire. They're still in that very early stage and they have that to-do list you described earlier. And you said, it's only me to do it. But when do you know that you need that next person? How do you like to think about that from the business perspective?
Well, the urge is to always bring that person on as fast as you can. And I think honestly today in the world we live in, you can probably wait longer. And this probably does go to AI and some of the tools that exist to, or you can lean into freelancers and in just other ecosystems before you're actually making that first hire. So I honestly like to wait as long as I possibly can, even though my frustration level is rising and I still think, oh my gosh, if only I had someone, we could go do all this amazing stuff. I guess the way that I would say it is, one, you have to make sure that you're obviously economically, the business is on financial footing to be able to bring that person in and know that it's not going to be an issue 3 months from now, right? Because that's not fair to whoever you're going to hire. But I think it's when you're getting those signals early on that you do have product market fit, or you do have that thing where you're putting something into the world and it's clear that it's resonating, right? This business has that forward traction. We're not going back. You can't do it in my mind. I mean, depending on how you're resourced, right? But the companies that I've been in, even Planted, we were incredibly lean. We were 3 co-founders. We did have 1 full-time employee. But we were also, we had some funding, but we stayed that way for, probably entirely through our almost certainly, we formally incorporated in May 2021. We were probably still 4 by the end of 2021, even though we were now closing a $2 million seed round, right? We were still just lean, really lean, But yeah, I think that's it. It's when you get those signals that we're not going back here. I've got some income coming in and we have the forward momentum.
If you were redesigning, let's just say curricula, even starting in K-12, you have kids that I assume are in school of some sort. What do you think they should be learning?
I have 3 thoughts on that. I think that, to say you need to be learning AI, of course, you don't even need to be learning AI for sure. But what I think, because of AI, what you still need to be learning, maybe say it that way. How do you educate children on building personal interrelationships, being good at meeting other people, expanding their networks? I just think about the work that I'm doing today and advising other companies and what value do I bring to them? It's the network that I've built and my ability probably to go open more doors because of that network. And then also because that's a skill that I have, right? That AI can't replace.
We still need humans. Yay.
For some things, right? And I think that like that's really important. Somehow I would want to be able to say, I need to put you as a student in a seal this box, still get you in there and still get you to write something somehow, or at least mirror what's going to happen in your brain when you have to critically put an argument together and not just have that spoon fed to you from artificial intelligence. Because I think that those skills, maybe it gets applied a different way. Maybe it's saying like, all right, you need to go think about a business plan, or, how would you do this? But how do I teach someone critical thinking as a skill, no matter however that's getting applied? The things that where you can use AI most effectively, you can interact with our humans effectively. Yeah, because those things will never go away. As much as I do think, like everybody else, that the AI is here and moving so swiftly to upend so much of what's happening in our society today.
Yeah. I think it's interesting to hear from people that are, out there in the companies, having the conversations, because of course you're interacting with different people and seeing the skill set or maybe lack thereof in certain places, and how those decisions are being made. And so I think about this, and also from the perspective of being a parent, I'm thinking about this often. One of the other questions I like to ask, I spend a lot of time thinking about potential, thinking about growth and impact. How do you like to think about potential?
For whether it's for me, and I think about it a lot in terms of my kids, like when we think about potential and reaching their potential, I think like I want to encourage someone to see the brightest future for what they want for themselves based on what they want, right? I'm not going to project onto you what I think you should do or what I think you should want, but right.
Then you would have never gotten to play football.
Right. Exactly. Right. So it's like, but if this is how do I get you to have again, clarity of vision for what this could be? And how do we kind of pull that back to say, what could be your potential next year, right? In some shorter time frame, which then starts to get to some goals, right? And but how could you have a vision for, what that could be a year from now, 6 months from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now? I do it, for myself. And then it's how do we get into action? How do I get into action? How does my son get into action? And for me, and for an entrepreneur, it's just to bring it back personally, like growing a company in potential. I still think that you have to have this, the self-delusional bubble around you where you're telling yourself over and over again, like, this is going to work, right? Like, I am crushing it, right? And this is what I do. I look for any little signal that says to me, oh yeah, like with Supercool, right? This is working. We got X number of, podcast downloads, or these people subscribe to the newsletter, or this person inquired, like, look, someone just inquired about advertising. This is going to work. And then I go cause now I have to go write something that's going to take me 3 hours that I don't really want to do. Right. So it's like, how do I trick myself into believing the future is absolutely happening and real to make it real? Right. And then move myself into action.
Josh, that's really resonating for me. It's reminding me of an author, John Acuff, who has a book called Soundtracks, and he talks all about the kind of the idea of the stories we tell ourselves that Brene Brown talks about. He calls them soundtracks, and he talks about the pocket jury. And he's like, oftentimes the pocket jury by default will tell us all the little evidence that you just talked about that's wrong. And so he gave the story of, he has like a bunch of 5-star reviews for his books, but there were like 3 1-star reviews. And so what did he focus on? He was like marinating on those 3 1-star reviews naturally. And he's like wanting to reach out to them and, understand why, all this stuff, right? And so he talks about this, flipping the pocket jury to what you're speaking to, like finding evidence of this. I like the idea of this self-delusional bubble. I might have to keep that in my mind as well, of everything's always working out for me, and seeing the evidence there that goes in line for that, instead of what our brain is naturally inclined to do, which is it wants to protect us. And so it's trying to be like, ooh, danger there. That's not going well. We better step back. And so it does have to be a bit of a trick to ourselves, I think, to form that new type of connection. So I think that's powerful.
And I do think that we have to recognize that everyone's different. Everyone's brain is different, right? So what works for you or works for me it's just not all going to be the same. I think for some people, crystal clear. I think for others, something that they can kind of see in their mind that whatever, because I think maybe there is manifestation, and I like to think about those things in synchronicity, and it does, and I think does open you up to more synchronicity. And I think all of that's really positive. But really, to me, it's like, what's the system I build around myself that does move me into positive action more consistently?
Yeah, I love that question. What's going to move me to positive action more consistently? I'm going to have to think about that one. Okay, Josh, can you tell our listeners where they can find you, how they could reach out to you, if there's anything with Supercool that you're wanting to share or promote?
Yeah, thank you for that. So if people want to find more about Supercool, the best place is our website, getsuper.cool. And you'll find the podcast, the newsletter, links off to the YouTube channel. We are on Instagram. Our handle everywhere is getsupercool. I am most active personally on LinkedIn. And so if anyone wants to connect with me there, any listeners, that'd be great. That'd be the best place to find me.
Wonderful. Josh, thank you so much for your time and sharing your stories and expertise. I've learned so much. I have like 4 pages of notes over here. And one of the things that we do as a part of the Building Thinkers podcast is when this episode's about to come out, we work on what we call a blueprint for thought. So I'm going to go back into our episode notes and think about what might be one of the takeaways that people can use as a thought experiment. It might be that last question you were talking about, or it might be around sustainability in their own businesses, but we'll be looking for that to come out too.
Thank you so much, Tracy. This was great. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. I enjoyed it.
Thanks, Josh. If you want to keep reflecting on this episode, subscribe to the Building Thinkers newsletter, where I share a blueprint for thought to help you turn insight into action. And if this conversation resonated with you, share it with someone else who you think might enjoy it, or leave a quick rating or review. That helps more thinkers find their way here. And in the meantime, let's continue to build thinkers.